On my 20th birthday, I got the shit beaten out of me. I don't remember swallowing my own teeth, but I dreamt about it many times ever since, and I don't think that's a sensation my brain would be able to just make up. I haven't had a nightmare about this in a while, but when I still used to, the worst part of the nightmare was the hate, the petty spite of it. Looking someone in the eye and knowing that they want to hurt me for no reason. I had decided to spend my 20th birthday doing one of my favorite things, chilling at the park with my friends and arguing about philosophy and science. We weren't even drinking. A couple of younger boys we didn't know came up to us, and we could see they were trouble. I could see in their eyes right away that they've been picked on and hurt so many times that that night was their night in their minds to finally be the ones delivering the hurt. I could see as well that they saw us as people who have had an easy life, who have never suffered. I wasn't good with words, still amn't, so I let a friend of mine try to calm them down. He got sucker punched. Then I went in to defend him and we all started fighting. When you know how to fight and you're fighting someone who isn't, it is relatively easy. Knowledge really is power. Adding that to the fact that most of the fighting that I've done was under the strict rules of the karate dojo or the slightly looser rules of the high school hallways, it was natural for me to go easy on them, kicking and punching just hard enough to knock them down, but not out. That is a mistake that I will never make again. While I was busy being compassionate to the people who were hurting me for no reason, one of them picked up a rock, snuck up behind me, and used it to give me the sexy eyebrow scar I've been sporting ever since. Then, as I was lying on the ground, they took turns kicking me in the face. Why am I telling you this? I was gonna say something sarcastic like, "Oh, is this making you uncomfortable?" But yeah, you're an empathetic person and you're hearing about another person's suffering. I'd be surprised and frankly disappointed if it didn't make you uncomfortable. It sure is making me uncomfortable. My fingers are shaking just typing this, and I'm pretty sure that the future version of myself that will be tasked with recording this will be having a pretty difficult time as well. Yep. So why? One reason is that I want to practice what Worm teaches us, that seeing several perspectives at the same time takes the sting out of our trauma. Can we see both perspectives at the same time? I doubt that they were having a good time as they were causing me an injury that would take months of dental surgery to heal and a mental wound that would take about a decade. I'm sure that even during the act they were full of hate and shame and fear and that nameless emotion that teenage boys are so familiar with when they know that they're going too far, but none of them wants to be the first to chicken out. And, if I'm honest, probably some sadistic glee too, sure. Still, according to our formula for villainy, this staggeringly large quantity of suffering caused, divided by a tiny amount of pleasure gained, earned them a villainy score in the thousands, easily. I wasn't thinking about it in those terms, of course. I wasn't thinking at all. I just had this feeling of, what is this for? The second reason I'm making you uncomfortable is that I want you to project this discomfort, this what is this for, when thinking about Leviathan, and his sentient decision to raise Armsmaster hopes just to crush them, or when Armmaster karmically propagates that cruelty onto Taylor in the next scene. I think it's hard to feel empathy for Armsmaster as Leviathan tears off his arm for no reason, but it's easier, I hope, to feel empathy for a person who is talking to you, telling you their story. The third reason that I'm bombarding you with my trauma is that I want to demonstrate how important it is not to be alone. Because when I was at the hospital soon after, waiting for someone to restore my face into something I could recognize, I had one friend with me, and not even a close one. As messed up as I was, I did the one thing that I could, which was pretend to be all right mentally. And that friend, that looked at me and had to say how fucked up I was, made a huge effort to pretend like he believed me. It was a cope, but copes are great as long as you let them go when they're no longer useful. The doctor who stitched my split eyebrow back into place was Druze, which is a small Islamic offshoot that has reincarnation as one of its main tenets. It was stupid of me to distract him as he was fixing my face, but I still used the opportunity to learn about that religion. I asked him, speaking very carefully as to not damage my loosened teeth any further, if Jews reincarnate also according to his belief. He told me that Druze reincarnate as Druze and Jews reincarnate as Jews, which I found incredibly charming. Not just because it's a beautiful answer, but because he responded to me at all. There was so much comfort in being listened to and engaged with, in the fact that these people agreed to play along with me. So 10 years later, as I read the post-Leviathan hospital scene, this is what I had in mind, and this is what I ask you to keep in mind as we follow Taylor contemplating Indecency. The hospital scene is significantly more potent for me than the Leviathan fight itself, and I think more meaningful. So Taylor gets teleported out of the battlefield into the middle of an ER. It's noisy, it's chaotic, not a second goes by without someone screaming in the background. Somebody picks Taylor up and she's in so much pain she can't even tell them how much it hurts to be moved with a broken back. They put her in a bed and the medical staff sticks an electrode to her collarbone and a clip to her finger. They don't introduce themselves, they don't tell her what's going on, they don't even look at her. The first person to speak to her is a nurse, asking Taylor the same question that we would all like to ask. Are you a villain? Taylor says that it's complicated and suggests that instead of applying moral categories, perhaps they could talk about her broken spine or the fact that she doesn't know if her best friend in the world, Lisa, just died. A PRT official behind the nurse points a gun at Taylor and answers for her. Villain. The nurse nods and leaves it to him to take care of Taylor. He manacles her to the bed, first her not broken arm, and then, as he grabs her other, she pleads with him not to move it, but he ignores her completely. She screams. This hurts so much to read. The suffering that Taylor endures here is a continuation of her getting psychologically tortured at school. The physical pain is never as important as how lonely it feels to have it ignored. Why is this here? Yeah?
Yeah, so she received the title of villain, and so nobody gives a shit about her broken bones, her dead friends, or about her pain in general. Once the category has been applied, hurting her is permitted, even if she did her best to help against Leviathan.
Yeah, that's what the text communicates to us, but it is in fact not what this is about. This is one of the first time we're faced with a decoy theme. We are led to believe that the story is about one thing, and we discover that it is in fact about something else. The real theme is going to reveal itself in less than 4 minutes. So the PRT officer draws the curtains around Taylor's bed and leaves her alone with her thoughts. Taylor describes the pain over having her broken arm hanging in the air from the manacle, the pain in her back, and the terrifying numbness under it. She realizes that the heroes might just not treat her, or not treat her well, and if they don't, it's likely that she'll never go on a run again, never go out in costume, and never have sex with a boy the natural way. I love how these 3 little words give you this depressing image Taylor has in her head at that moment. How, instead of an ecstatic experience between 2 people, the best sex that she can hope for might be doing her best to pleasure another person while hoping that it's good enough. This isn't just excellent prose, but the genesis of a theme regarding disability and romantic relations. Taylor continues her musings and expands on the false theme of having her efforts ignored. I'd done the heroic thing, drawn Leviathan away from those in the shelter who were still alive. A part of me was proud of that. The rest of me? Faced with the idea of spending the rest of my life in a wheelchair? I felt like an idiot of epic proportions. Remember when we talked about feeling like a fool? This is the reason people don't do noble things. This is what they're afraid of. Taylor's train of thought shows, on the individual level, how a society that doesn't reward decency pushes people towards trying less. A very young nurse comes over to check up on Taylor, and even though Taylor begs her for information, the nurse remains silent. At first, I thought this was a symbol for the silence of God, but now I think it's another manifestation of the severing of communication as a result of distrust. Taylor thinks that the nurse isn't talking to her because she's a villain, so she attacks from that angle. I know you think I'm bad, a villain, but I'm a person too. It doesn't get much of a reaction, so Taylor continues, exposing herself in an attempt to get a reaction, anything but to be alone. I have a dad, love him to death, even if we haven't talked lately. I love reading. My mom taught me to love books from the time I was little. My best friend, it wasn't so long ago that she helped pull me out of a dark place. I haven't heard how she's doing, if she's dead or if she's here too. Have you seen her? Her name's Tattletale. One of my favorite things about the prose is how the author communicates to you that it still hurts Taylor to talk about her mom, even just to remember her with a single tiny stutter. The reason I want to see this book getting a prose-focused edit is not so much because the overwriting and the occasional unnatural dialogue bother me, but because they prime the reader to ignore details, and then the reader misses out on a lot of good stuff. Taylor's oversharing finally cracks the nurse, who responds by saying that they aren't allowed to talk to patients, since some heroes sued the staff after a behemoth attack. Yeah?
Did you mean some villains sued after the behemoth attack?
No, it was heroes that sued. The silence that Taylor conceptualized as punishment had nothing to do with her being categorized as a villain, the decoy theme. It had everything to do with the real theme of Leviathan. A small number of people did something indecent, and as a result, the entirety of society became worse. In the case of the litigative heroes, the damage made by their suing wasn't just that they took some money that wasn't rightfully theirs, but that now everybody who lies down with a broken spine after fighting an Endbringer has to weather the same silence Taylor did. This is why we can't have nice things. The nurse leaves and Taylor thanks her dearly, which is the decent thing to do, but even still, she's left alone, and the boredom soon overtakes the pain. She disassociates from her own body by playing with some cockroaches when Panasha/Amy enters the room, segueing naturally from casual shit-talking to asking for Taylor's permission to touch her body and heal her. Not because she's polite, but because, again, this is America and people sue. Taylor hesitates. She reminds Amy of the threats she'd made at the bank robbery, that she'll make Taylor obese, girls can be so mean, or that she'll make anything Taylor eats taste like bile. They start arguing about the nature of decency. Notice that this is in accordance with our definition of decency. Amy counterattacking Taylor in the bank wouldn't be considered indecent, but using the fact that Taylor is hurt from fighting Leviathan in order to enact a personal vendetta is a break of the truce, making it indecent. Amy claims Taylor's distrust is poetic, that if Taylor is a decent person, she'll assume Amy is decent too. And if Taylor is indecent, she'll project that indecency onto Amy. I love this so much because it's wrong. One of the many reasons I hate Amy is because she's so goddamn privileged and naive. The correlation Amy points to is correct broadly. Decent people are more likely to assume others are decent, but the causality is reversed. If you grew up in a world that was fair and decent to you, you'll assume others are decent because that's what you've seen, and you're also likely to become decent yourself. On the other hand, the more people have hurt you and have been indecent to you, the likelier you are to distrust and to become indecent yourself. Nobody wants to be the only decent person in an indecent crowd. When Taylor straight up asks Amy if she's a decent person, Amy is offended. For her, it's easy to say that she is. Her intentions are good, so what's the problem? Taylor has already learned how good intentions could lead to bad places. She thought of herself as decent, but ended up being an accomplice in the kidnapping and forced drugging of a preteen girl. This is one of those perfect examples of perspectives colliding. From Amy's perspective, Skater robs banks for the lols/money, terrorizing people in the process, and just stands aside and scoffs as Tattletale threatens to casually destroy Amy's relationship with the person she loves most in the world. From that perspective, the fact that she's messing with Skater, scaring her a little before healing her, is not that big of a deal. From Taylor's perspective, however, not only was Taylor herself trying to do the right thing at every single turn, including risking her life against Leviathan, but now Amy is psychologically torturing her with the threat of lifelong torment for no reason, while Taylor is already tormented by the horrible anxiety of not knowing whether Lisa just died. From Taylor's perspective, Amy's vicious as hell, and Taylor can't decide whether to give her permission to touch her. On the one hand, Taylor's injury is so bad that a normal, Amy-less recovery very likely means no boy stuff and no cape stuff either. Girls, after all, just want to have fun. On the other, if Taylor does trust Amy and Amy betrays her, she might spend the rest of her life suffering from some devilish torment. In the end, Taylor finds a particularly spiteful reason to receive treatment. I mean, whatever she deigned to inflict on me would be calculated to make me miserable if she went that far, but at least then I'd have someone to hate. This is really important. Taylor realizes that a life of pain caused by her own mistake is insufferable, even worse than being permanently bullied by Amy. I'm going to parallel this so hard with Armsmaster, just you wait. Amy touches Taylor and by doing so senses the amount of damage she took. Hearing about the perforations and the internal bleeding startles Taylor, but not because it's a scary amount of damage. It's scary that she didn't know how badly her body was wounded. Drawing a straight line from Bakuda's pain bomb to Lung's squishing Taylor in his fist, we see a trend in which Taylor slowly detaches from her own body mentally. She's diminishing the communications with her own body, as if ignoring what it has to say. This primes us for the theme of the other body horror, which is going to get bounced around between Taylor, Weld, Sophia, Regent, and Dragon, all the way to Kepri. Amy heals Taylor's injuries, though not her still concussed brain, and leaves her chained up. The heroes want to talk to Taylor, Amy says. Taylor asks why. Amy smirks knowingly. Taylor freaks out and demands that Amy tell her that if she's using information to torment her like this, she's not a decent person. Amy reminds Taylor that what Lisa threatened to do to her was 100 times worse. Taylor shuts the fuck up. I love these scenes where somebody we hate makes Taylor eat her words because the reader is so aligned with Taylor that it's also the reader who gets their mouth shut for them. But it doesn't hurt so much because it happened to Taylor. Taylor isn't real. Everything that she's feeling is actually stuff that you're imagining you're feeling, but we're not ready to have that conversation yet. Remembering how the Undersiders humiliated the heroes at the banquet, Taylor considers the option that Armsmaster might use the opportunity to arrest her. If that's his plan, she better not be there when he does. As soon as Amy leaves, she uses her bugs to steal the keys and release the cuffs holding her to the bed, then gets up on her wobbly, freshly healed legs and attempts an escape, using the pretty reasonable strategy of moving from bed to bed, trusting the curtains to hide her, until she accidentally stumbles upon Shadowstalker lying in bed without her mask on, an event that, as a consequence of which, Taylor loses faith in humanity. Taylor stumbles upon Shadowstalker, but that's not what she looks like to her. It looks to her like Sophia, wearing SS's costume. It takes Taylor a moment to understand what she's seeing. Sophia was Shadowstalker, a ward, all along. We all remember this part. Taylor realizes that being a ward might have helped Sophia not get expelled at the school meeting. She is disillusioned with the Heroic Institute for enabling someone like Sophia to ruin Taylor's life, and the corruption angers her more than the fact that the abuse was performed on her. Taylor's bugs notify her that someone noticed that she's not in her bed, but she's so shocked with her discovery that she doesn't try to run away. For a moment, the girl that sprayed Lung with pepper spray is so disappointed with the world she lives in that she stops trying. Armmaster arrives, grabs Taylor, and forces her to walk even though her legs haven't recovered. Armmaster has not had his arm healed yet, sporting a clean stump, but his one arm is strong enough for him to overpower Taylor. Then he slams her against the ER counter and bends her over it. I agree, that is an unpleasant image. As opposed to the nurse's silence, Armmaster's brutality isn't necessary, he just likes doing it. What?
Isn't that a bit unfair?
Yeah, okay. From his perspective, Taylor is a sneaky-ass villain that already came up with a treacherous plan to join the Undersiders just to sell them out before realizing she actually just likes being a villain. Finding Taylor standing over the unmasked SS, he's reasonably applying the distrusting interpretation that Taylor used the fact that the heroes were decent enough to give her sci-fi levels medical treatment in order to break the truce and unmask a hero. So he's furious with her, and shoving her around, bending her over forcefully, alleviates that fear. The formula for villainy does not care. Armmaster is causing Taylor suffering, humiliation, and physical pain for his own emotional benefit. That's villainous. But he, Legend, and Miss Militia don't see it that way. To them, they are heroes, and Taylor is a villain. Here we start to see the theme of morality as strategy, that people choose to be heroes not because of some goodness, but because it's easier. The heroes get a very different treatment from the villains, and it shows early on. Legend yells at Armmaster, and a moment later tells Taylor to keep her voice down. They claim Shadowstalker would have been treated the same as Taylor if the situation was reversed, but we know she wasn't punished for things that were way worse. But being slammed against the counter is not the worst part of being a villain. It's that no one listens to Taylor. Taylor tries to explain things from her perspective, that she didn't know what was going on and was terrified. Being told by Amy that the heroes want her chained up, she tried to run away and didn't even think that she might come across someone without a mask on. Legend is halfway receptive to this until Armmaster pulls out a "Skidder here has been building a fairly strong reputation as an adept liar, so be cautious." And that's it. Nothing she could say now matters. In a way, this is much worse than Armsmaster telling Dauntless to put on headphones to block Tattletale from telling Dauntless how envious Armsmaster is of him. Armmaster isn't afraid of Taylor's words. He's just making the strategic decision to devalue them. Now the heroes can call the shots, stating that Taylor only has two options: go to the birdcage or join the wards. She refuses to join the wards. She narrates that if she went, Sophia and her would kill each other, which is a lie. It sounds reasonable that if two girls in the same organization have a history of violence, they would be separated or supervised. No, that's not the reason. The PRT pulled the strings so that Sophia would be able to abuse Taylor, literally causing her more distress than her mother's death, with virtually no punishment. They must have known when she got suspended, and barely a week later Sophia was out at the bookstore doing her best to tear Taylor's ear off. And the heroes did nothing. They make her sick. Nauseous, even. Taylor tells the heroes she'd rather go to the birdcage. Why? Because there's something more decent about monsters being monsters than about monsters calling themselves heroes, or heroes covering up for monsters. Taylor asked for a third option, which causes our master to yell a very fascist, "We have the authority here." At which point Brian steps into the scene saying, "The only authority you have is the one that people give you," reminding us that a social contract has two sides. Let's talk about hip-hop for a second, specifically about NWA, a band, the explicit name of which I will not say. However brave and dangerous it was to publish a song named Fuck the Police, I was never really impressed with its lyricism. Compared to modern rap, it is very basic. There are a couple of lines in Fuck the Police, however, that I found philosophically nourishing. They're delivered by MC Ran, and they go something like this. What am I doing? Pulling out the silly club so you stand with a fake-ass badge and a gun in your hand. You notice what's odd about this line, right? The police in Fuck the Police are real. This isn't a song about people pretending to be cops. So what does it mean that the badge is fake-ass? The only legitimate authority is the one being given by the people said authority is applied on. MC Ran, like Brian, does not agree to be governed. Not by these people. And not just because he is a villain. Brian grew up as a black kid in a city where Hookwolf not only exists, but publicly declares his violent intent towards the lesser races. And he's not talking about NASCAR. Kaiser's pool drew a lot of white supremacist villains to the city, and it's not a leap to imagine that Brian's mother being addicted to drugs and his father being emotionally withdrawn to the point of being abusive has something to do with the anxiety that generates. Just take a second to imagine walking around in your city knowing that Hookwolf walks the same street and knowing that showing a single inch of your skin is enough for him to actively target you. That shit makes me want to relapse right now. Brian might very reasonably feel that our master's authority isn't earned because he hadn't done more to protect Brian's family from that. I mean, he doesn't know that Arm's master killed Kaiser, which in itself is pretty cool. In the next couple of lines of Fuck the Police, MC Ran develops the statement further. But take off the gun so you could see what's up and we go at it, punk, and I'ma fuck you up. Here, Ren points at two consequences of Arm's master hiding behind authority. One is that his own perspective is skewed and he can't see what's up. The other is that his own power is unfairly augmented. Without the backing of the government, Ren could fuck said police officer up. The superiority of the police officer is not earned by martial prowess. Brian doesn't respect our master's authority because he's weak. In the banquet, the Undersiders defeated a significantly larger number of heroes in combat. They proved that they were stronger and weakened the PRT's authority, which is exactly why Coyle sent them to do it. So, in the hospital, Brian tells our master that he ain't shit, and the rest of the Undersiders chime in, Lisa blessedly among them. First read, I breathed out the biggest sigh of relief. Miss Militia, aware of the hazard of Taylor sharing information with the Undersiders, demands that they leave, which would mean leaving Taylor alone with our master, who holds her in a way that makes it clear he doesn't respect her bodily autonomy. Brian responds, so you want us to leave a teammate in your custody here? No, I'm staying. Taylor is touched by that, as are we. Not just by the fact that Brian and the rest came to her aid. Being called a teammate is the opposite of being condemned as a villain, particularly when it is in front of other people. After all that loneliness, Taylor's friends are standing up for her. We have something similar to what we had with Leviathan, right? The heroes and the villains got together in order to fight this bigger threat, and similarly Taylor and the Undersiders were separated, but when a bigger threat entered the scene, they put their differences aside to work together against our master. This is such a cool structure for a story, and it only gets better. A remark from our master about Taylor always having her reasons for doing what she does makes Taylor realize the danger she is in. Our master might snitch on her on the fact that she originally intended to betray the Undersiders, but then she reassures herself. He wouldn't, she narrates. Why? Because he's got basic decency, right? Lisa tries to talk, but again communication is denied of her, because she really might do damage. Miss Militia draws her gun, making Lisa and the Undersiders leave with a promise to Taylor to take care of it. That promise quickly comes into fruition in the form of Lisa hacking her own wristband to make a public announcement to everyone present. There's a lot of back and forth in this scene, but I want to finish this video before the AI wars start, so I'll skip to the point. Miss Militia, Legend, and Arm Master are now willing to listen to Lisa as long as she's willing to not broadcast to everyone whatever it is that she knows. What does she know? That Arm's Master used his predictive software to ensure the one-on-one fight that he had with Leviathan, manipulating him into a trajectory that went through Kaiser and Fenja, killing them both. Dauntless also died in that maneuver, but that was obviously an accident. Is that a bad thing? After all, they were Nazis, right? I hope I'm not offending anyone by saying that the world would be better with fewer Nazis. Did he do it just in order to kill Leviathan and maybe make the city a little bit safer? Or did he derive a sadistic glee like Taylor once had? He sure seemed like he enjoyed slamming Taylor against the counter. But the bad part isn't that he enjoyed it. It's that in order to do this, he had to betray the truce. These Nazis had enough decency in practical terms to step up to fight Leviathan. They trusted the heroes enough to obey commands on where to go, and Armsmaster used that trust to kill them. Murder them, even? Imagine being a villain, finding out about this, and then being expected to step up against an Endbringer in your local city. Imagine being given a wristband knowing this. Remember Yuna? Leviathan isn't the villain in Yuna, the deterioration of social cohesion is. Armsmaster's crime wasn't killing the Nazis. It was that if anybody found out, the unspoken rules would be broken. It's not just trust between two people, but a matter of what kind of society they live in and what are its basic rules. Even if he would have killed Leviathan, that would not have been worth the deterioration of that social contract. Just like with the heroes suing the hospital, one act of indecency can make everything worse for everybody. After Lisa reveals Armmaster's crime, Miss Militia gives out a tiny, "Oh no." That is enough to remind us of her interlude, and that she finds it really easy to believe that Armmaster did in fact do something like this. Armmaster tries to get Lisa to shut up with his words, going as far as calling her a bitch, the same word that he refused to use for Hellhound's sake, before reaching for his EMP blaster only to recall that it's not there, and finally resorting to violence, swatting Brian and Alec aside in his attempt to grab Lisa before Legend, being a decent human being, lasers him to the ground. Armmaster is defeated, powerless, literally humiliated, and the worst part is that he knows he's got no one to blame. The same sentiment Taylor risked a life of obesity and everything tasting like bile to avoid. In that extreme point, again, Armmaster's true nature is revealed. He lashes out to hurt someone, anyone, and Taylor realizes instantly what he's about to do. Fascinating to me that Taylor now asks Brian to silence Armmaster with his power. Taylor is just as adept at communication severing as the most corrupt hero, but Brian doesn't comply. He wants to know. Armmaster tells him what we and Taylor already knew, that Taylor planned to betray the Undersiders from the start, though of course he doesn't tell them that she changed her mind. Like in the fight with Leviathan, it sounds unhinged. "You want to look down on me?" he challenges. "That girl is the person you should be mocking, spitting on." Bro, nobody's spitting on you. It's just that you knowingly killed a human being and, we're worried. Brian asks if it's true, if Taylor really did plan to betray them, but because the main conduit for trust is a flow of information, he isn't asking Taylor. He's asking Lisa, thus letting Taylor know that he doesn't trust what she says, just like Legend did mere minutes ago. And that's so painful. Taylor is even lonelier now than she was at the start of the Endbringer fight. "Yeah," Tattletale sighs in response, and the Undersiders leave. Taylor runs away even though she has nowhere to go, and the scene is over. We are not moving to the next scene. We're going to go over this scene again. God help me, this shit is so dense it makes the Bible feel like Dragon Ball Z. So let's start with the obvious stuff. Taylor was disillusioned by finding out that a ward can be a person like Sophia. She used to assume that heroes are heroic, but now that illusion is dissed. What does it say about the heroes she grew up admiring, like Alexandria? Are they actually good people, or did they, like Sophia, just choose a career in the PRT for their own personal benefit? And still, while being bent over by Armmaster, reminding us of pre-Undersider's Lisa being frisked by Cole's mercenary, she assumes Armmaster is going to be decent. And God help me, does he disappoint. She thought he had the basic decency not to attack the last relationships she had. But he did, and he left her completely alone in a terrifying world, and he did it for literally no gain. What the fuck was this for? From Taylor's perspective, there's no trusting interpretation. This might be the highest villainy score we've ever seen. But Taylor's perspective isn't even the most interesting one. Imagine what this looks like from Brian's perspective. He was slowly opening up to this girl, buying her a gift, and going along with her excuses to kiss, and telling her about his sister. He even let her go when they almost fought outside of Cole's compound, favoring his emotions over strategy. Then during the fight with Leviathan, he heard his wristband telling him that she died, and then realized that he's been a fucking idiot, that he shouldn't have let her go, that he should have stopped being such a cowardly hellhound, and just told her how he felt. And then he found out that she was alive, but under Armmaster custody. Brian loves saving people, and he doesn't even hesitate to step in and call her his teammate. only to find out that she was planning to betray him all along. Can you imagine the heartbreak? And it gets even better. Check out this insane parallel. The villains agree to cooperate with the heroes to fight a bigger threat, and the heroes betray that trust. Remember this pattern: villains, heroes, bigger threat, truce, betrayal. In the first case, the villains are Empire 88, the hero is Armsmaster, and the bigger threat is Leviathan. I'm going to risk sounding repetitive because I really want this to be clear. Empire 88 trusted Armsmaster enough to take the wristbands and get into the fight with Leviathan, and Armsmaster used that trust to kill them. According to Miss Militia, Armsmaster's real reason for this was to get a better standing with the heroes. In Taylor's case, she's the hero and the Undersiders are villains, and they come together against Armmaster. Wait, are the Undersiders the villains here? Yes, that's how Taylor saw them when she started out. When they first met her, they were ready to cooperate in order to take on stronger opponents together. There is no other reason for the alliance. And Taylor planned to betray that alliance to find out information about them and stun them out in order to, you guessed it, get a better standing with the heroes, just like Armsmaster. Waibo does this insane thing that I don't see being done anywhere else, which is not just having the most hated character and most loved character do almost the exact same thing, but he also brings these two parallel patterns into culmination, one right after the other. We find out that Armsmaster betrayed the public truce, and a moment later, the Undersiders discovered that Taylor had betrayed their own private truce. The reason Taylor allowed herself to deceive the Undersiders was because they were villains. Taylor, on her first night out, wouldn't deceive Armsmaster in the same way she chose to deceive Brian. Armsmaster is the same. He wouldn't set up Alexandria to die in the path of Leviathan, even for the greater good, but he would let Kaiser die. It's also worth mentioning that in order to stop Taylor from reporting Leviathan's location, he used an EMP blast to kill Taylor's wristband, severing her communication in a situation where she was very likely to need a medic or an evacuation. That could have easily killed her, but she's a villain, so who gives a shit? I was wrong. Condemning people as villains isn't a decoy theme, it's a real theme. Like Yuna not wanting the people of Nineveh to be forgiven for their sins just because they fast a little, Armmaster doesn't want Taylor to be absolved of a career of villainy just because she attended one Endbringer fight. Similarly, it's because Taylor is a villain that Armmaster gives himself permission to ruin her friendships. He knows she isn't going to betray the Undersiders at this point, and he's not strategically attacking the Undersiders either. If he did, he would have done that before. He doesn't know that the Undersiders are pretty much the only thing Taylor has left, but he knows it sucks to be hated by your own team. He feels it at that very moment, and it hurts him extra hard because, as I see this character now, all he cares about is status. Up until Leviathan, every action he took as a hero was in order to elevate his own status. The heroic formula doesn't apply here. His actions helped others, but they also helped him. That's not being heroic, that's just living a good life. So why does he attack Taylor? I don't feel like I have the necessary skill to explain this, so I'm going to rely on an author better than myself. God. And when I say God, I mean, of course, a whole lot of people passing a story as oral tradition, adding tiny variations until they end up with a very meaningful text. If you see God as society itself, it actually makes sense to say that the Bible was written by God. I always found it strange that the first death in the Bible is murder and that the reason for that murder is spite. If I had to guess, I'd expect the first motive to be survival or reproductive resources. But Cain murders Abel simply because he's jelly. The simple story is that both of the brothers offer sacrificial offerings to God. Abel, the nomadic shepherd, offers meat, and Cain, the settled farmer, offers grain. God prefers Abel's sacrifice over Cain's. Cain invents murder, field tests it, and is outcast from society. Why does God like Abel's sacrifice and not Cain's? There are several interpretations, but this is the one I like. Herding sheep in 1500s BC Canaan is dangerous. You need to defend your sheep from lions, bears, and most dangerous of all beasts, men, particularly if they have hungry children. Cain has to work hard and long hours just like Colin, but he is stable and safe. At worst, he needs to scare crows. On the other hand, the food he gets isn't as nutritious. More importantly, Abel sacrifices the youngest, most delicious lamb, meaning that he gives his best, while Cain simply gives from the fruit of the land. God is still a personification of society, and his liking of the offering symbolizes the reward society gives you for your efforts. Cain clung to safety and didn't give his best like Abel did. God's disapproval is the result of that selfishness, of that cowardice. Faced with proof of that failure, Cain is filled with bitter rage, shame, and that nameless emotion that only arises when one realizes that they have betrayed themselves. How does Cain cope with that emotion? By killing Abel, who didn't betray himself. How does Armmaster deal with that very same emotion? Imagine for a second being in Armmaster's place, Legend lasering you to the floor, Miss Militia pointing a gun at your face, both of them just having found out that you fucked up bad. And at the same time, you have to watch as Skitter, a sneaky-ass, treacherous villain, is being stood up for by her friends that she earned. And the worst part? Knowing that it really is your fault. So he reaches out to destroy Skitter because she didn't betray herself.
Wait a second, but Taylor did betray herself. Her friendship with the Undersiders is based on a lie. Colin isn't just hurting her, he's exposing her to be a deceiver, just like him. Cain tried to hide his murder, but Colin character assassinates Taylor out in the open. Colin hates the unfairness of the world, and it's so unfair that Taylor gets to keep her status while he loses his. He's trying to make the world fair again. In fact, Cain's story can be read as a story about unfairness. Both him and Abel did their best, and God favored Abel over Cain for no reason, just like life favors Dauntless over Armsmaster, and that's why he kills him.
Ah, shit. No, yeah, you're right. I wanted to use Cain as an unrelated example, but now I'm actually starting to think that Wildbow meant for this to be a reference for Cain and Abel, particularly considering that Armsmaster is relatively safe within the establishment, and Taylor at this point is homeless and nomadic. The problem is, even if he wanted to make that connection, the names Cain and Abel aren't in common use in the modern US. Maybe if Wildbow could have found a name that sounds similar to Cain, or the original Cain, something with a C, I, and an N. Anyway, I don't think Colin actually gains anything from snitching on Taylor. By the way, did you notice that he does to Taylor exactly what he called Tattletale a bitch for doing? We can imagine how MM and Legend look at him after this. At this point, we differentiate between indecency and spite. Indecency can be useful in a selfish sense, like in the case of the heroes suing the hospital. You're ruining everything for everyone else, but at least you're getting something out of it. Spite, on the other hand, isn't a strategic decision, but an emotional state in which one hurts themselves in order to hurt others more. Usually that mental state has to do with humiliation. Both suicide bombers and school shooters often report humiliation and a need to get back as their main motivation for destroying their own lives, however different their cultural backgrounds are. Plot-wise, this would have been a pretty good place to stop and summarize. Theme-wise, however, we're only picking up more and more momentum. Make yourself a cup of tea or some shit. We've got work to do. Quantum decision theory. The next chapter starts with Taylor looking at the names of the fallen carved into a memorial obelisk and explaining to the reader why post-Endbringer memorial services aren't a thing anymore. First of all, this is an example of great science fiction writing, a credible simulation of how the human element would react to the fantastical element in the story. Secondly, this is great world building, a dynamic changing story spanning the entire world. There used to be post-Endbringer memorial services for villains and heroes together, but now there aren't any. Why? Because people weren't decent enough to grieve together, and some capes used the opportunity to attack their enemies while they mourned. A lack of decency by a relatively small number of people, making it so that we can't have nice things. Similarly, Taylor will later muse about the amount of time she spent awake in the shelter late at night. She wasn't kept up by her guilt, but by a small minority of people who were intentionally making noise in order to bother everybody else. Indecency and spite are everywhere. What is wrong with this world? Taylor asks, that it is this fucked up, that people like Armsmaster and Sophia can call themselves heroes. Taylor recognizes correctly that it is something in the world, not specifically about these two people, not something wrong with Brockton Bay's heroes, it's not even the PRT as an organization. She recognizes that it is a natural law of this world that indecent people succeed. And why wouldn't they? Someone who is indecent and rational has an advantage over someone who is decent. Indecent people, assuming they don't go as far as spite, are exactly the people who want to succeed more than they want to be decent. When having to choose between status and decency, they will choose status. This is why Taylor was so alone at the pre-Leviathan get-together. She always chose decency. The chapter develops this statement even further. Taylor sees two names carved into the obelisk, Brutus and Judas, Rachel's dogs that she carved herself into the stone. English, unlike Hebrew, was not designed to be cut into stone, so carving these names must have been hard work. Sickening, someone behind Taylor comments while holding a toddler. Vandalizing this? So soon? The names, Taylor responds. They mean something to someone. This is a really important statement as well. People will often categorize decent acts as indecent when they don't understand them. Taylor herself professes to yelling at someone at the shelter and realizing in hindsight that they didn't deserve it. This is where Lisa meets Taylor to discuss whether Taylor is going to come back to the Undersiders. With all of this thematic weight, we have to rethink some things. Is Lisa a decent human being? Back in the loft, when Taylor left the Undersiders, I said that Lisa was the only one to extend trust to her by letting her go. But that was a very trusting interpretation. What if she knew that Taylor would come crawling back if she felt like she could still talk to Lisa? What if Lisa knew that extending that trust is the easiest way to eventually have Taylor back on the team? She didn't know Leviathan was going to attack, of course, but that didn't matter. If anything, because of Leviathan, Taylor now has a place to stay in the form of the shelters. Without that, she really wouldn't have anywhere to go. For now, we can't know. Lisa tells Taylor that she knew all along about Taylor's plan to betray the Undersiders. That she knew, in fact, before Taylor did. In order for Taylor to understand how Lisa knew before she did, Lisa needs to explain Cole's power. I have a theory, she says, that every time you make an important choice, a part of you left behind continues the other life you could have had. Nah, just kidding. That's not Lisa. That's oranges are not the only fruit. Cole's power is an expansion of the idea presented in Oranges. He can split reality into two, being aware of his actions in both realities, until he decides to collapse one reality, leaving him with the other one. That's why he's so rich, investing in stocks he can buy in one reality, sell in another, and collapse the reality where he lost money. That's not that interesting, of course. What's interesting is that so many of the times it seemed like the Undersiders had plot armor, they actually had two attempts, and the reader was given a view of the reality where they didn't die. So Taylor discovered that there existed a reality in which the Undersiders fought Empire 88, and things went even worse. As you remember, in our timeline, things were pretty horrendous, as Taylor very narrowly avoided being penetrated with a windblade, because Brian managed to pull a super unlikely 007-esque move and save her at the last second. Finding out that things in the other reality went worse, the reader can easily imagine the other Taylor that was horribly murdered in a way that Hookwolf and Stormtiger found entertaining. And Taylor can imagine that as well, knowing that it really happened. How do you even process that kind of thing? Don't think about Maury. This is what I mean by the horror of what is. These realities were just besides Taylor in the fourth direction all along. And it only gets worse. I'm going to summarize Cole's interlude quickly here. Through Cole's perspective, we see how little he cares about other people. His sociopathy is not so much communicated by his narration, but by the lack of it. He simply has no sympathy for anyone. Even as Dina, the girl he kidnapped and got addicted to drugs against her will, whimpers in torment, he thinks more about the irritating quality of the sound than the human being making it. I could imagine someone like Taylor or Armsmaster in a slightly darker timeline being in that situation and thinking something like, of course it's horrible that Dina is suffering so much, but if I don't constantly exhaust her and her power, she could use the extra questions and the clarity of mind to trick me into a position where she is rescued. And I can't have that because of the greater good, right? But for Cole, her suffering isn't worth a single thought. It's unclear if this is a result of his power altering his brain, like in Rachel's case, or if it's just that he doesn't see people as real anymore, if at any moment he could decide that they, with their entire reality, would vanish. I don't think he sees human beings as having free will either. Knowing what decisions people made in other realities, you can predict what decision they'd make in similar situations. And if you predict their decisions before they make them, did they really have a choice? Cole's name is Thomas Calvert. Thomas, like Thomas Hobbes, who wrote Leviathan, in which he speaks of the necessity of strong sovereign, Calvert being Middle English for cowherd. Considering that Cole's expressed goal is to rule over these people who he sees as no more than cattle, I don't think any further analysis is required. Within his interlude, Cole opens a reality in which, to alleviate his boredom, he beats Mr. Peter to death with about the same enthusiasm that I would quick save in a video game to kill an annoying NPC. And this is the man running the Undersiders. This is how he sees them. And the good part, it only gets more horrifying. So let's talk about quantum mechanics for a second. At the start of the 20th century, some physicists arrived at some pretty disturbing results when measuring the behavior of particles like photons and electrons. Oversimplified, the problem was that things in the nano world were random. A photon going through a semi-transparent mirror can bounce back or go through, and there's no way of knowing in advance. An identical photon in the exact same angle and wavelength may behave the same or differently. This is what we're going to call a quantum decision. I'm resisting the urge to dive into this, instead saying that two main explanations were offered in order to explain this randomness: the Copenhagen interpretation and the many worlds interpretation. The Copenhagen interpretation suggests that there's only one reality, and in that reality the photon can either bounce back or go through, and it is decided randomly. In the city of Copenhagen, Denmark, the philosopher Søren motherfucking Kierkegaard wrote that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, which is something I think about often when writing these essays, and also the name of a pretty good story by Ted Chiang. Chiang's story functions under the many worlds interpretation, in which every quantum decision creates two different universes, meaning that every single second, a staggeringly large number of universes are created. I know several physicists who actually believe this, and they're all kooky as hell. In the story, a device is invented that allows people to track a divergence of realities, allowing people from different realities to communicate through a video screen. The data transferred is limited, and the devices are sold in a market, where the price is decided by the age of the device. The older the device, the older the split in realities, and so the stranger the reality on the other side, as the divergence had more time to butterfly effect. How much would you pay for a video call with someone from a world where Trump ended up being president twice? Or with someone from a world where a Jewish state was established in the Middle East? Or, if such a thing is even possible, how much would you pay to speak to someone from a world where virtually nobody knows about worms, simply because the author refused to open the book with the line, "Take that, you worm"? In Chiang's story, the destruction of a device has no effect on the reality on the other side. The person you talk to is still there, you just can't talk to them anymore. And I would like to make the claim that Coil's power works exactly the same way. Coil thinks that he splits reality and collapses one of the branches, but he doesn't do either of those things. Reality splits naturally. All that Coil's power does is let him stay in contact with himself from the other reality. What he thinks of as collapsing a reality just means that he's disconnecting from it. That means that there is a reality in which Coil beats Peter to death, collapses that reality, and then finds himself awkwardly standing above Peter's body. A reality in which Brian failed to save Taylor from Hookwolf, or Taylor failed to save Brian from Cricket. The people in that reality are still alive and experiencing it as real. I don't think I can back this up using the text, yet. But physically, this makes much more sense than an interpretation in which Coil can create a whole new universe, as if he were God. Anyway, Lisa tells Taylor that she knew before Taylor did. That is, according to Coil, the Undersiders were sent to attack Lung in one reality and were told to wait in another. In the first one, Taylor attacked both Lung and the Undersiders at the same time. Notice that she didn't need the excuse that Lung was going to hurt children. Coil dismissed that reality, and in our reality sent the Undersiders a little later, meaning that they attacked Lung after Taylor had already engaged with and weakened him. Coil told Lisa to look out for a hero, and she did. One of the many reasons Worm has so much fanfic is that Worm demands that you write your own fanfic yourself. Reading this, you are prompted to imagine the entire story again from Lisa's perspective. When Lisa met Taylor on the roof for the first time, when she said she's not hurt, she's just shy, she already knew that Taylor is a hero that wants to hurt Lisa. She knew that Taylor sees Lisa and her team as villains who can be screwed over. And she chose to get her on the team anyway. When she met Taylor out of costume for the first time, showing her face, she knew. When she hugged her and bought her clothes, she knew. When they were eating together at Fugly Bob's, when Taylor started to say that she hoped she could call the Undersiders friends, and Lisa cut in, telling her that she'd slap her in the face if she finished that sentence. She knew. Lisa was literally having supper, knowing that one of those sitting at the table is going to betray her. Who does that remind you of? And not only did she forgive Taylor, which is divine, but as literally everyone in Taylor's world either hates her or is angry with her, including her only remaining parent, Lisa is the only one who still likes her. And that's worth so much because, like God, Lisa sees Taylor for what she really is. I would go as far as saying that there is salvation in the fact that Lisa still likes Taylor, that she trusted her all along. According to the Tao Te Ching, the master trusts people who are trustworthy. She also trusts people who aren't trustworthy. This is true trust. Lisa was in a position where it was easiest for her to hate Taylor, and she still loved her, and I would go as far as saying that she loved the betrayal out of her. Well, that's a trusting interpretation, right? What did we get from Lisa's interlude? Nothing scares Lisa as much as disappointment, and so when she knew Taylor was actively planning to betray her, she felt like she could be at ease because the betrayal won't surprise her when it comes. How much did that change? Is Lisa still cautious of an upcoming betrayal, or has Taylor become the only person in the world that Lisa actually trusts? I think the truth is somewhere in between, as it usually is. Lisa tries to talk Taylor through her decision whether or not to return to the Undersiders, but stops as soon as her power tells her that Taylor has already decided on a plan. Whether that plan includes the Undersiders, we don't know. Whatever she decided, we're now going to see it through Taylor's perspective, but through the Wardses in their interludes, which will develop on the same themes while setting up one of the biggest challenges for the reader this book offers: understanding Sophia. Let's summarize what we saw here. When everyone around you is decent, you are very likely to become decent yourself. But you are also given the opportunity to be indecent, making the world slightly worse. Most of the time, being indecent around decent people is just bad strategy. Nobody wants to be friends with someone who'd screw them over. But sometimes it's pretty great. You can be indecent to people who are not your friends, or be secretly indecent to people who are close to you, and reap pretty great benefits for yourself, as long as you aren't discovered like Colin and Kyne were. Sometimes I think that this is the natural state of human beings. Decent for PR purposes, indecent when it benefits them. And if that is true, that truth is scarier than Leviathan by far. I would have preferred to live in a world where everyone is decent, and every once in a while Leviathan comes from the sea and kills thousands of people, rather than our world where people are so indecent that we need to have laws and a mandate to apply violence to enforce these laws, just so we could live in relative peace. Worm, being a philosophical work, prompts you to look at the world and wonder why it is the way that it is. Who are the indecent people making the world worse? Are they driven by strategic indecency or maddened by spite? And if so, what drove them to that spite? But just like our master condemning Taylor as indecent for accidentally unmasking Sophia, just like the man with the toddler condemning Rachel as sickening for vandalizing the monument, we too should be careful of condemning others as indecent before knowing enough. Who are you condemning now as indecent and villainous? How much do you know about these people? Can you imagine the reality they live in? Worm isn't a book about forgiveness, not exactly. It's a book about understanding, about seeing. The parallel realities Cole communicates between so close yet invisible are a metaphor for the realities of other people. Lisa being aware of Taylor's betrayal and keeping it to herself, Rachel mourning her only friends and having her act of quiet lament be seen as an attack. These different realities are all around us, and their interactions are often tragic and beautiful. Speaking of the former, I'd like to apologize for the last video. First of all, for the voices. I spoke to my friend Pump, and when I asked for his opinion, he said he thought it was funny, but also like I was mocking him, which I really didn't intend to. I would like to apologize to Pump and everybody who felt like him. That's 100% my responsibility to fix, and I hope that you enjoyed the guest voices on this video. Also, my assertion that it's the fans' fault that Pale suffers from normal web serial ailments seems unbased, cringe even. I should have focused on my anger about the readers being impolite to the author, which I still stand behind. Sometimes when I get protective, I go overboard, but that's no excuse. Feedback is important. Speaking of which, thank you for everyone at the Patreon server who helped me workshop this essay. The number of patrons more than doubled since the last video, and though I didn't expect the server to focus almost only on literary analysis of Worm and Worm-related books, I could not complain, even if I tried. In our first conference call, we analyzed Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha and the Nature of Suffering, and that was fire, if I may say so myself. Extra large thanks to Embarking Frog, my first ever consultation client. We spent our first video call workshopping a story about prisoners with an emphasis on beautiful descriptions. It had pros and cons. Until next time, watch out for spite, you hear? That shit is dangerous.